Is the Fujifilm X100V good enough for portraits? What's up guys, Reggie B Photo here and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new, my name is Reggie Ballesteros and I'm a wedding photographer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I recently picked up the X100V and rather than repeat a lot of what others have said about this camera, I wanted to offer my unique perspective on it as a wedding and portrait photographer. The X100 series line of cameras has more than proven itself when it comes to documentary work, photojournalism, and street photography. But there were always a couple of factors that prevented me personally from using the previous X100 series cameras for portraiture, mainly the wide open sharpness and close focus optical performance of these cameras. But with the announcement of the X100V, I had high hopes. It was advertised as taking the tried and true X100 form factor, pairing that with the advancements in the sensor and processor technology of the X-T3 and the X Pro 3, and implementing a newly redesigned lens. So with these key improvements, it begged the question, is the X100V finally good enough for portraits? To put it to the test, I used the X100V as my sole camera for an entire engagement session, and let me tell you, it performed beautifully. But before we get into the review, I did want to give a quick shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers thousands of classes, including classes on photography. I believe that to become an expert or master the craft of photography, it's important to learn from as many different photographers as possible. That way you can expose yourself to different ways and approaches to solving the same creative problem. And Skillshare is the perfect place for that. Because I want to try my hand at street photography with the X100V, I watched classes from two different street photographers, Trash Hand and Jamal Berger. And even while their courses had similar lesson plans, they had unique perspectives on how they approached the same type of shot, whether it be an environmental portrait or a city lookup. The first 1,000 people who click the link in the description will get 2 free months of membership to Skillshare Premium. So be sure to take advantage of this opportunity to expand your photography skill set. Alright, let's get back to the X100V and how it does for portraits. First, let's talk about the wide open sharpness. This is probably the biggest game changer that the X100V brings when it comes to portrait photography. With the newly redesigned lens, unwanted softness when shooting wide open at f2 is no longer an issue. While there's more to a good portrait than shallow depth of field, separation from the background and good bokeh can often help make a good portrait even better when used intentionally. Now onto the tilt screen. So like the previous models that came before it, the X100V has a fixed focal length of 23mm or an equivalent of 35mm in full frame. This is considered by some to be a wide angle lens. And when shooting portraits with a wide angle lens, subjects tend to look better when the camera is held slightly higher than eye level. And if you're short like me, when holding the camera higher than eye level, keeping tabs on the exposure settings and framing can get a little tricky. And that's where the tilt screen comes into play. The tilt screen gives me a seamless workflow when shooting at higher angles for more flattering portraits with the fixed 23mm lens. And while some of you X100 purists may think that the addition of the tilt screen was a misstep by Fuji, for my shooting style and line of work, I personally love it, and I can't imagine living without it anymore. Closely related to the wide open sharpness of this camera is its improved close focus performance. When shooting portraits, I personally like to shoot a variety of crops and framing. Full scenes, medium shots, intimate shots. It's important that the sharpness is decent throughout the entire distance range, even at extremely close-up distances. And often, I like to photograph the details and accessories of my subjects, which includes the engagement ring during engagement shoots. I'll have to be honest with you, the X100V's faux macro and close focus ability really came out of left field for me. Not only is the sharpness now usable, especially when stopped down to f2.8, but the magnification that you can now achieve with the newly redesigned lens rivals that of the 16mm 1.4. And if you own or have ever tried the 16mm 1.4, you know that the close focus ability is why many people fall in love with that lens, myself included. So having this type of close focusing ability packaged in such a compact form factor, well, it's simply mind-blowing what Fujifilm achieved here. Because the X100V inherits the processor and sensor from cameras like the Fujifilm X-T3, you can already imagine how much the autofocus speed, low light autofocus, low light and high ISO image quality has improved with this new camera. The latest Fujifilm cameras have been getting praise for a reason, and this camera is no exception. I will have to make a small note though regarding the autofocus speed. While the fixed lens is a 23mm f2, it does not have the same autofocus speed as the XF 23mm f2 Fujifilm prime lens. You have to remember that overall the lens on the X100V is smaller and the optics are different, so to expect it to have the same fast autofocus is somewhat of an unrealistic expectation, and something that personally I want to warn you about before purchasing the X100V. With that said, for portraits though, the autofocus is totally usable and the face and eye detection is definitely a welcome improvement. So even considering all these positives, I have found some negatives about the camera. And perhaps the word negative is even a little too strong of a word, so let's call them quirks or pet peeves. So to start things off, having a 1/4000th shutter speed limit is a little annoying sometimes, especially because I'm used to the 1/8000th shutter speed limit of the Fujifilm X-T3. In brighter conditions, I have to enable the ND filter to work around the shutter speed limit, and this actually brings the exposure down a little too much in some instances since it's a pretty strong ND filter. I think it's -4 EV. Next, the removal of the D-pad was a big bummer for me. I'm all about customizing the function buttons of my Fujifilm cameras, and I will always welcome having more function buttons at my disposal. Yes, the touchscreen is there to replace some of these functions, but for complete muscle memory mirroring with my Fujifilm X-T3, I would have rather had the D-pad than the touch capability function gestures that are on the X100V. And this last quirk is something very specific to my shooting style, but I don't like how the drive mode menu has the bracketing option so far down in the list. On the X-T3, getting to the bracketing mode is just a simple turn of the drive dial. On the X100V, it requires a button press to get into the menu, and I have to navigate all the way to the bottom. For me, I like to be able to quickly switch over to bracketing mode for any high dynamic range scenes, and this adds a few seconds to my life. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but if I could rearrange the order, that would be awesome. And because I know someone's going to ask about this in the comments, no, I did not notice or observe any type of heat issues on my X100V during this shoot as well as outside of this shoot. And no, I haven't noticed anything as far as focus ring grinding or anything like that either. The truth is, in normal shooting operations, I haven't noticed any issues at all for both professional work and my personal work. So let's get back to the original question. Is the X100V finally good enough for portraits? And for me and my shooting style, the answer is yes. Yes, it is. But if you're looking for that ultra creamy bokeh, crazy compression, or lightning fast IAF, this camera is not going to give you any of those things. If you're a wedding or portrait photographer like me, it really is going to depend on your photography style and if you even like taking portraits at the wider focal lengths. But if you're looking for an all-around compact camera for travel, documentary work, and personal photography, and you're just curious if the X100V can hold its own for portraiture, well, I think the X100V will be a good candidate for you. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Do you use your X100V or X100 series camera for portraiture? If not, what is your preferred camera for portrait work? let me know down in the comments below. So if you're interested in seeing the full behind the scenes video of this engagement shoot that was shot entirely with the Fujifilm X100V, including my tips and strategies on how to pose couples who are not models, be sure to subscribe as I post a new Fujifilm and photography video every week, and that one is going to be coming up this coming week. But if that's too long, please follow me on Instagram at ReggieBPhoto as I post new tips, tricks, and tutorials throughout the week. Thank you so much for watching. Alright, that's it for me. Remember to get out, go shoot, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.